Thousands of children and families in Marion County struggle with issues like poverty, substance abuse, or mental and emotional illness. Many local services exist to help families in crisis, but families often don't know about these services or can't get to them. Unmet needs can result in child abuse, neglect, or juvenile delinquency. The Early Intervention Planning Council, through the Marion County Commission on Youth's Early Intervention and Prevention Initiative, has created a plan to give families earlier access to services in the hopes of reducing the number of children who get abused or neglected or turn to delinquent acts. We hope you enjoy our monthly program, Our Kids, Our Families, Our Communities, and learn more about the local services here to help you.
Hi, I'm Shana Martin, Director of the Early Intervention and Prevention Initiative at McCoy. Thank you for tuning in and joining us for Our Kids, Our Families, Our Communities. This episode is going to focus on advocacy and legislation. So we have experts here with us today to help us to better understand the importance of all of us getting involved and being aware of what's going down at the state Senate House, at the legislature, and making bills and laws and how that impacts our families and our community. So thank you all for being here today, and I'll just let you guys introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about what you do and what organization you represent. So David, I'll start with you.
Sure, thanks. Thank you for having me. I'm David Sklar. I'm the Government Affairs Director with the Jewish Community Relations Council. We are the advocacy and intergroup relations arm of the organized Jewish community here in Indianapolis. So it's my job just to represent the Jewish community in Indianapolis to our elected officials and policymakers.
Great. Thank you for being here today. Lucinda?
Great. I'm Lucinda Nord with Indiana Association of United Ways. We serve the 60 United Ways in the state of Indiana that cover the majority of the state, and we work with our agency partners throughout the state and our faith-based partners in advocating for a variety of issues.
Thank you.
And I'm Mindy Goodpaster. I'm the Director of Public Policy and Advocacy for McCoy, the Marion County Commission on Youth.
Okay, thank you guys for being here today.
Thank you.
So tell us a little bit why it's important for people, including youth, to be aware of the bills and laws that are being proposed during each legislative session.
Well, I guess I could start. It's really important for young people to be aware of what's going on because it's the foundation for becoming a good citizen, to be informed about what affects them and their families and their neighbors, and to help shape their parents' views as well.
And I think it's important for people to understand what's happening in terms of the laws that are being passed. The laws affect them, their daily lives, and if they're not informed and aware, decisions are being made on their behalf that they really should have input in. The legislators look to the general public to tell them how they want to shape their laws, and if people aren't aware of what's being made, then the legislature just sort of goes and does whatever it feels it should be doing, and maybe that's right and maybe that's wrong. So.
And I think they have an opportunity here in the state. It's a lot different than obviously Congress, where everybody's so far away. But here in Indiana or Indianapolis, you know, their legislators live in their neighborhoods. They work at businesses in their communities, and so they have an opportunity to really talk to those legislators and let them know what's important to them, and you know, so they have that opportunity to have a real in-depth conversation about those policies, which is important for those legislators to have.
And before I started at McCoy, I think I was one of those people who thought, you know, I don't need to know about that. I'm not going to have an impact. Whatever I say or think won't make a difference. You know, and as I've gotten involved and learned more, it really does matter. I mean, the decisions that are being made by the state legislator really does impact us. And the things that they do, it helps our kids in some cases, or it can hurt our kids. Sometimes there are unintended consequences of decisions that are made today that in 2 years, you know, we realize, maybe not so good. So it's really been great for me to be able to get involved and learn more. And so just talk a little bit about, do people have an impact, real people? You know, I always thought that it was more for lobbyists or professionals to get involved in advocacy, or that was the only people who legislators really paid any attention to. But I'm learning that that's not necessarily the case. So can you guys, you know, talk a little bit about, like I said, how kind of real people do influence policies and legislation and really make a difference?
I mean, we certainly play a role, but I think if you ask any state legislator, they'll tell you that they want to hear from their constituents first, before any of us advocates in the hall. You know, and I think a number of them have told me that anywhere from 7 to 12 to 15, contacts either via email or phone calls from their constituents could be enough to sway their vote one way or another. So it's certainly important for them to get involved and in contact. But no, those legislators certainly want to hear from people in their districts, and it's very important to them. And we'll probably choose to hear from them, more than us.
Right. I agree. I'm thinking of very specific legislation where a pastor comes and talks about the value of important common sense regulations in child care, and how that's how he as a pastor is moved to do that. Or I'm thinking of a parent of a child aging out of foster care, or the youth aging out of foster care, him or herself, talking about the importance of access to college, or the college students who were caught in the unfortunate situation with the tuition rates for children of immigrants who were able to advocate for their ability to go back to college at in-state tuition rates, and that made a difference.
And I think about, too, something that happened this session as well with an anti-bullying law that was just passed. It had been a challenge to get that through the legislature in previous years, but this year we decided that legislators, instead of hearing from us as lobbyists, needed to hear directly from youth and parents themselves, youth who had been affected by bullying. So during the House committee hearing where the bill was being heard, youth came, some of Youth Advocacy Council members from McCoy, as well as other youth, came and told their stories, told their personal stories about how they had been bullied and how it had changed their lives. The legislators were moved. They were moved. They had not heard those personal stories yet, and that caused them to really sign on to the bill and support it. And then when it moved to the Senate, we had some of the mothers come, mothers who unfortunately had tragically lost their daughters because of suicide that was related to bullying, and the mothers came and told their stories. And again, the legislators who they had not experienced that themselves saw these real people, who were being affected by this critical issue, and thought, we need to do something to change our law to make a difference and help protect youth. And I think that was the most powerful thing that could have happened. It's not enough for me to come in and say bullying is a big problem. It's more powerful to have the people who are being impacted by the issue themselves.
Okay. Tell us a little bit about the difference between advocacy and lobbying, because we've kind of said both of those terms, and for those who are watching, they may not know that there is a difference or what the difference is. So when we talk about advocacy, what are we talking about? And when we're talking about lobbying, what are we talking about?
Well, I would say that it all falls in the category of trying to influence the outcome of a legislative decision. But the way that I sort of make the distinction is that the lobbying is actually making a specific ask for either funding or vote yes or vote no, support this, support a specific bill or a specific piece of funding, where advocacy is really more about trying to change opinion, trying to shape public opinion, trying to educate about an issue. That's how I would define it.
I agree. I think I view advocacy as something that is really trying to inform and educate and make more aware of issues. I see my role as in a dual position as a lobbyist and an advocate. As a lobbyist, it's my job to understand the policies that are being made, to understand the implications, the unintended consequences of laws, and then to educate our constituents on those issues and why these issues are important. And then as well to be that liaison between the youth and between the families for the legislators. I have the ability to say, well, here's what they're thinking, here's what they're feeling, here's what they want to see happen. And then I can also make that ask and say, can you please support this law, because that's going to help make a difference.
Okay. Anything you want to add, or does that
No,
cover it?
They covered it very well.
Okay. So although lobbyists primarily are paid positions or folks that work with a specific organization, advocates are anybody and everybody. I mean, we can all be advocates. We can all go down at any time and ask to speak to our state representative. We can go down at any time and sign up to provide public testimony on any particular bill or legislation, just to, like you said, raise awareness or say that this has been my experience as a person in the community. This is how I've been impacted or affected, and please consider this when you're making these decisions. Any of us can do that. I have not had the opportunity. I was there, present, but because the session ran a little longer than I thought, I didn't get the opportunity to, but it was really exciting to know that even outside of my role at McCoy, that's something I could do at any given time and moment. How do people kind of keep up with what's going on? I think, having somebody who's able to help with that is great, but again, for somebody who's just watching this and wants to know, well, how do I even know what's being passed or proposed, or who my state representative is?
Well, there are lots of websites and newsletters that provide lots of information. The news media is also a good source. And what I would encourage young people and their parents and their family members is to get out and meet with their legislators over the summer. There might be an opportunity if you're in a summer camp to invite a legislator to come visit the summer camp, or if you volunteer or work or attend a youth program, invite the legislator to come and see it and tour it. And that's a great way to form that relationship out of session, to really express that these are the issues that are important to me.
And then I think just a couple of resources, during the session. There's always the Indiana General Assembly website, which is in.gov/legislative. And that's just a good place. You can track some legislation. There's a tool to find out who your legislators are, just an address search, so you can find out that information. And there's also live video that you can watch during the session. All of the committee hearings and floor debate are web streamed, so you can watch that live. And then I would also suggest, if there's a particular issue that you're interested, or just general issues like children or education or things like that, there's any number of organizations like ours that are continually tracking and trying to update people on their websites during the session, either via newsletters or bill tracking or things like that, where people can find information. So any of the three organizations that we represent will do that type of information over the session and try to make people aware of what's going on.
And legislators, too, they've done a really good job now of creating their own personal web pages on the in.gov website. So they've got a page that talks about their priorities, that talks about how they voted on particular bills, what they feel about particular issues. And they also send out electronic newsletters, so you can sign up to be on their newsletter, and then they send out information about how they voted, about what's coming up in the legislature. And I think that's really important to hear directly from them. In the beginning of session, too, most legislators will send out a survey card or an electronic survey that you can complete that asks, what do you feel about these issues? Here are some things that I know are coming up in this next session. How do you feel about them, and how do you think I should represent you? And I think that's really important to know where your legislator stands, because then you can tell them where you stand and try to get them to see the situation from your point of view. Okay.
Thank you. Talk a little bit about this past legislative session, and the session goes from January to April. End of April is usually the session. What took place, what happened that was really good for kids and families, and maybe some things that maybe we need to kind of continue to keep an eye on, or may come up again next year that folks can start to be prepared for.
Well, I think before, I know Mindy and Lucinda have a couple of pieces of legislation that they wanted to talk about, but I think, just overall context of the session, it was extremely busy. There were a number of contentious issues, but I think the environment was pretty civil during the whole session, much more than we've seen in the last couple of years. So, there were a lot of good conversations between members of both parties, a lot of bipartisan work on pieces of legislation, differences ironed out in the end. Certainly some things happened that, again, were a bit contentious, but overall I thought that the tone and the environment was very civil this year.
From our perspective, we have a high priority on advancing quality early care and education. So we really look at quality child care and helping promote the Paths to Quality system for child, so that parents know what a high quality child care provider is and what kind of requirements, just common sense requirements there are for those child care providers to be able to accept certain kinds of subsidy or the CCDF voucher, which helps a lot of low-income families. There's also now going to be criminal background checks on child care workers that had not been taking place in the past. So that's a major victory. There were a number of pieces of, as David mentioned, just bipartisan supported initiatives around protecting children and helping families around early care and education. There's a pre-K matching grant program that will be initiated over the next year. And then what consumed a lot of attention this year was around the issue of the Department of Child Services. That state agency had been under a lot of scrutiny over the last couple of years, and there was a major study committee that met for a good part of 2012. They issued some recommendations, and most of those recommendations were acted upon in terms of making improvements to the hotline where reports of abuse or neglect could be called into. So overall, it was a great session for kids and families. There are still lots of things that are going to be studied over the next year, and we can talk about that.
Mm-hmm. And what do you mean by study? Tell me a little bit about what that is.
Well, sometimes when legislators can't agree on exactly the right policy, what happens is they make a recommendation that the legislators will come back over the summer through an interim study committee. So that maybe they could work out some other issues. So, for example, one of the study committees is going to look at youth athletics and concussions, because that was a hot topic of how do we protect our kids who are in after-school programs or in youth athletics, and what kind of training should the coaches have, for example. So that's going to be one of the topics studied.
And in terms of prevention for youth in general, there were a couple of bills that passed that I think do a really good job of addressing some of the issues before they become huge problems. One is there is now going to be a commission on children that is going to look at kids who are involved in the juvenile justice system, the child welfare system, to see how are we serving them, are we meeting their needs, are we addressing the issues, are the services coordinated, are they working together, are they efficient, are they maximizing resources, and ultimately then make some recommendations for better legislation that will improve those systems and how they serve children. It also will have a focus specifically on looking at the Department of Child Services to specifically address some of the issues that were found in last summer's study committee. And then we have also, in addition to the anti-bullying bill that's now a law, which will actually address more of prevention in schools. Traditionally, we've looked at discipline only for bullying when it happens. Now we're going to look at putting some prevention programming into schools, helping schools understand what is bullying, how do you deal with it, how do you prevent it, and then what do you do if it is happening in your school? What are some guidelines and some policies you can put into place to better address it, to get it to stop and protect both the targeted student and the bully, because we know that bullies have a lot of issues just as much as the targeted students of the bullying. And we will also be holding schools more accountable for the policies that they put into place. Tagging along with that, we now have a gang prevention law that will be doing similar things to prevent kids from being in gangs. We are, for the first time, going to have a statewide assessment of what our gang issues are in Indiana. Where are the hot spots? Where are they forming? What are the gangs like? And then what services and resources do we need to put in place into those specific communities and schools to better address it? Not just looking at kids in a gang, they commit a criminal activity, then we arrest them. We're going to look at how do we get kids out of gangs if they're already gang involved, and how do we prevent them from getting in the first place. And schools are going to be integral in that process. They're going to be a resource of materials and prevention and awareness for teachers to understand what are the signs of gang involvement and what should you do if you suspect that a student is gang involved or if one of your colleagues might be gang involved. So really having all of the systems in a community working together, not just the police, not just the courts, but the education, churches, nonprofits, pulling all of those resources together to address the gang problem comprehensively.
Okay. David, any?
Yeah, I think a big issue that JCRC and I know United Ways were working on that we were not successful on this year is the issue of Medicaid expansion, as it was prescribed by the Affordable Care Act, otherwise known as Obamacare. So when Obamacare was created back in 2010, what they did was ask each of the state to expand their Medicaid programs. This is health insurance and health access for low-income individuals, and expand their programs to a certain point beyond where many states were already. When that law went to the Supreme Court said that the federal government couldn't force the states to expand their programs, and each state had to decide for themselves whether it was in their best interest to do so. So right now across the country we're in a process where states are deciding whether they'll expand their Medicaid programs, and we think that Indiana should expand their program. Right now we have one of the most restrictive Medicaid programs in the country. If you're a family of 3, you can only have a gross income of about $5,000 or maybe a little bit less to be eligible for the program. With the expansion that we think should happen, that income level will go up to about $22,000 or $23,000. So it's a pretty big jump, which obviously the state has to decide whether that's whether we have the ability to afford that increase, and we think we do. There's going to be a lot of money coming in from the federal government to help the state do that. We think hundreds of thousands of families that don't have the ability to have health insurance right now will get covered. 400,000 individuals. We think that it'll create somewhere in the neighborhood of 30,000 jobs in the healthcare industry. So we think that this is really a win-win for the state, and we weren't able to get the legislature to decide to go ahead and expand the program, but we still have some time. Governor Pence is working with the federal government to see how we can do that and how the state wants to expand that program. So we're still actively working with policymakers even after the session is over to try to do that. And I think this is one of the most important policy issues facing children and families right now, because obviously healthcare is so important to everybody. And when we have 400,000 individuals in Indiana, Hoosiers, that don't have health insurance, that affects everybody. And so, we certainly need people to be contacting the governor, letting know that Medicaid expansion is important to them, that if they'll be impacted by the program and be able to be on it, and what that will mean for their families. So we need everybody to continue working with us to show Governor Pence and the administration that this is something that Indiana should be doing.
Okay. Now, is there a specific way for people to contact the governor? A phone call, email, letter?
I think, right now, email.
Okay.
Email and phone calls to his office to let them know that that they support the expansion, that they think it's a good thing. I think also working with, again, organizations like ours, I know we'll be generating more action alerts and opportunities for advocacy over the next couple of weeks and months. So just get involved with a local nonprofit that might be interested in the issue, and they'll show people where they can get involved. One very good place that a number of our organizations have sort of come together to form a coalition is an organization called Cover Indiana, and I believe their website is coverindiana.org. Mm-hmm. So people can go there and sign up on the website and just say that they support Medicaid expansion, and we need as many people to sign up on that site as possible. And that's a very good mechanism for information on that issue.
Okay, great, because we know that when we talk about prevention, primary health care is always on the list for preventing
Absolutely.
Lots of things. Preventing, believe it or not, kids from entering the child welfare and juvenile justice system, but preventing diseases, preventing just unhealthy behaviors. So if families have access to the insurance needed to get their primary health care needs taken care of, then it really saves us a lot on the back end with ER visits, and and it's just always great to have families connected to a primary care physician. A doctor I can go to every single time that my child is sick, not to have to sit in an emergency room, waiting room for hours and hours, not knowing who you're going to see. So it really makes sense. So having folks to really take the time to email or call the governor's office, or to even just take the time to learn more about what Medicaid expansion can look like and how it can benefit us, as opposed to just kind of continuing as we've been with lots of folks who are uninsured and unable to get the assistance that they need. So thank you very much. Anything else you guys would like to share? Any other ways that folks can get involved? What can youth do? I mean, I think sometimes, is there an age at which you become an advocate or not? And how much can youth get involved?
Well, one of the first ways that a young person can get involved and have direct hands-on experience is to volunteer to serve as a page at the General Assembly.
Okay.
It's a great experience. It puts young people in touch with legislators. They would apply through their own individual legislator, and that's at in.gov/legislative. They can also, as we talked about before, go to town hall meetings or third house sessions, find opportunities, because there are lots of opportunities for legislators to interact with constituents. And I'll tell you, legislators like talking to young people. They like visiting classrooms. They like talking to young people, because the young people tend to be really honest about what their needs are and how they feel about certain issues, whether it's the texting while driving, or the I-STEP testing, or tuition rates, or any of the issues that our legislators are making decisions about kids.
And McCoy has a youth advocacy council that we look for youth between the grades of 9 and 12 to get really involved in advocacy and issues that they're concerned about. It's not just about advocating with the legislature, but also getting more involved in your community. You need to be involved in your community and understand your community in order to be an effective advocate. So civic engagement and community service are both vital. And if you want more information about that, you can contact our office and we can get you squared away. It's a very simple process to get involved. But one of the things that we did do this past session was have youth come and testify at a hearing at the legislature on the bullying bill. And it, again, was very effective, and I think it was very exciting for them too, because they felt they were heard. They felt that their voices were heard. They were able to express them, people listened, and they were valued for what they had to say. And I think that was a great experience, and they all learned a lot from that.
Great. Any way for youth to get involved specifically?
No, I think they covered.
Okay. Well, thank you guys very much for being here. Really appreciate it, and appreciate you helping to raise awareness and be an advocate about how to become an advocate in the community, and that the legislators and the legislative process is not something that people should be scared of. But being informed is really important, because the decisions that are made by those few people impact lots of us, and they impact our families and our kids. In some cases to a great extent, and it's really important that we be able to be aware of that, and to take the time to talk to or send letters or send emails to our legislators, but also raising awareness within our community, talking to our neighbors and our family members and our friends to also get them involved and make them aware that these things are happening, and for them to raise their voice. So, and young people as well. And as we have young people, I have an 8-year-old who has lots of questions and wants to be involved. So encouraging young people to start to get involved and to be part of their community. So thank you guys very much, and thank you for tuning in to our kids, our families, our communities. We look forward to seeing you the next show.